It was supposed to be the Galactic Council's finest hour. The flagship of their fleet, the Radiant Star, had arrived on the fringes of the Selox anomaly, a mysterious and volatile energy vortex feared across the galaxy. Alien scientists from dozens of worlds believed this was their ultimate test of technology and innovation. The crew, a mix of the galaxy's brightest minds, had calibrated energy shields, drawn up intricate charts, and tested every variable for weeks in advance. Every piece of tech was primed and perfectly synchronized to counter the chaotic force of the anomaly. As the Radiant Star approached the swirling mass, a faint shimmer disrupted the shields, sending a shiver through the ship's systems. Alarms blared, warning lights flashed, and the calculations began to spiral out of control. In the midst of the turmoil, an alert popped up on the alien commander's screen. A transmission from a human maintenance engineer named Jack, stationed in the science wing. He looked entirely unfazed, as though oblivious to the anomaly threatening to tear the ship apart. "Commander," Jack said casually, barely lifting his coffee mug, "I think we need rock salt." The bridge fell silent, and every alien stared at the human in disbelief. "Rock salt?" the commander asked, his voice laced with shock and confusion. "To stabilize an energy vortex?" Jack grinned. "Trust me, it's a human thing." The command center of the Radiant Star bustled with activity. Alien officers from every corner of the Galactic Council's territories manned their stations, expressions tense as they monitored their screens. The Radiant Star was a masterpiece of galactic engineering, a floating city equipped with cutting-edge technology from every member species. Sleek, advanced, and vast, it represented centuries of cooperative innovation. On any other day, this command center might have exuded calm efficiency, but today, every pair of alien eyes was focused on the fluctuating fields of energy displayed on their monitors. The Selox anomaly was a cosmic enigma, a volatile maelstrom of magnetic storms and plasmatides that defied logical explanation. Sensors struggled to contain the raw data surging from the phenomenon as the ship drifted closer. The aliens had been preparing for this mission for decades. Commanders, scientists, engineers, all specialists in their fields, had studied for years to withstand the anomaly's chaos. They'd analyzed particle interactions, built reinforced shielding systems, and ran hundreds of simulations. Yet, now, as the anomaly loomed before them, their hands hovered over controls, a creeping doubt hanging in the air. Across the command center, voices murmured anxiously. "We've accounted for every variable," one officer muttered, his eyes wide as he scanned the readings. "Why are the readings still destabilizing?" "Impossible," replied another, hands gripping the sides of her console. "Our data is flawless. There shouldn't be any flux." At the heart of the command center stood the alien commander, Cree, a tall, sharp-featured being whose iridescent scales shimmered faintly under the bridge lights. She was a veteran of countless galactic missions and was renowned for her unwavering dedication to protocol and precision. Commander Cree's mandate on this mission was to maintain order and execute protocol flawlessly, a challenge that had, until now, never given her pause. "Steady your positions." Cree's voice cut through the din, calm but resolute. "We have trained for this moment. The anomaly may be unpredictable, but we have prepared for every conceivable outcome." Despite her confidence, Commander Cree couldn't ignore the increasing tremor in the energy shield. She adjusted her posture and studied the readings, her mind racing with calculations. If the shielding failed, the Radiant Star would be pulled into the anomaly's gravitational field, torn apart by forces they barely understood. "Commander," an officer reported, "the field disturbances are oscillating faster than our calculations predicted. At this rate, our shields will destabilize within minutes." Cree clenched her jaw. "Activate all backup power to the shields," she ordered. "We must hold position." Just as the officers scrambled to comply, the silence of the bridge was shattered by a low chime, an incoming transmission alert. The screen blinked, revealing the image of a human engineer with unkempt hair, a faint grin, and an unmistakable air of nonchalance. He was holding a coffee mug, his other hand propped casually on his console. It was Jack. The alien stared, taken aback by the casual demeanor of the human. Here they were, inches from a potential catastrophe, and this human engineer looked as though he'd just rolled out of bed. For a few seconds, the command center was silent, punctuated only by the low hum of the failing shields. Cree narrowed her eyes at Jack. "Human, do you understand the severity of our situation?" Jack took a sip of his coffee, glancing sideways at his console. "Oh yeah, you're about to lose the shields and probably drift right into that anomaly." Cree's eyes widened slightly. "Then why are you so calm?" Jack set down his coffee mug, his expression shifting from casual to mildly amused. "Because I've got a solution," he said simply, as if it were obvious. Cree waited, bracing herself for whatever advanced technological insight this human might offer. "Well, what is it?" "Rock salt," Jack replied with a grin. The command center erupted in murmurs. Aliens exchanged confused glances, and Cree's eyes narrowed further, the incredulity plain on her face. "Explain," she demanded, struggling to mask her irritation. Jack shrugged. "Rock salt, it's simple. Salt disrupts certain electromagnetic fields. If we can place it in strategic positions around the shielding core, we might just be able to stabilize the fluctuations long enough to get out of here." One of the alien scientists scoffed, leaning forward. "You cannot be serious. Rock salt is primitive. It's a mineral with no special properties." "That's where you're wrong, my friend," Jack replied, looking amused. "On Earth, we use rock salt to melt ice, repel supernatural entities, and, more relevantly, to manage all kinds of small electromagnetic interferences." Cree folded her arms, visibly skeptical. "We have more advanced technology on this ship than you can imagine, and yet you propose a basic mineral compound as a solution?" Jack smirked. "Sometimes the simplest things work. You've been trying complex solutions all along, right? How's that going?" There was a beat of silence as Cree, though unwilling to admit it, considered the fact that their sophisticated technology was failing to contain the anomaly. The simple, almost reckless approach of sprinkling rock salt sounded ludicrous, but with every second the shields edged closer to collapse. Cree turned to her crew, her tone measured. "Very well, human. You may proceed, but understand that failure will result in drastic consequences." Jack chuckled, unbothered. "I'll take my chances." As he left the bridge to gather his supplies, the aliens remained frozen in place, stunned by the suggestion. Conversations buzzed quietly around the room. "Is it possible?" one officer muttered. "Could this human trick actually work?" Another officer, visibly unsettled, shook his head. "It defies reason. If rock salt was capable of stabilizing electromagnetic fields, our technology would have already accounted for it." The chatter was cut short as Jack returned, holding a hastily assembled kit filled with bags of coarse, grayish crystals. The alien crew watched in muted disbelief as he approached the shielding core. He began placing small piles of salt along the base of the containment field, humming a tune under his breath as he worked, his calm confidence unnerving the alien crew. Cree watched with arms folded, her skeptical gaze never leaving Jack. "Human, if this salt does not work, our lives will be lost. Why do you persist?" Jack looked up, giving her a small, reassuring smile. "Because we humans aren't afraid to try something new, even if it sounds a little crazy. Worst case, we'll go down knowing we tried everything." Commander Cree could only watch in a mixture of frustration and fascination as Jack continued his unorthodox method. Jack continued setting up the rock salt around the shielding core, whistling to himself while the alien crew observed in varying states of disbelief, curiosity, and barely veiled panic. Each alien officer exchanged glances, struggling to reconcile the humans' calm demeanor with the grave threat they were facing. One particularly skeptical officer, a sharp-eyed scientist named Quar, stepped forward, frowning as he watched Jack arrange small mounds of salt along the shielding core. "Human," Quar began, his voice tinged with skepticism, "I fail to see how this assault of yours could affect the anomaly's electromagnetic distortion. Our analysis of this anomaly suggests complex, chaotic field interactions far beyond the capabilities of a mere mineral." Jack glanced up, giving Quar a calm, almost mischievous smile. "Well, that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Rock salt's a simple solution that doesn't have to make sense on paper to work in reality. Sometimes it's not about what's supposed to work, it's about what actually does, Quar scoffed. And you're certain of this because, Jack shrugged, finishing one of the salt piles with a gentle tap, because humans have used salt in ways that frankly should make no sense. Keeps us safe from all sorts of trouble back home, especially the kind that doesn't play nice with magnetic fields. Cree, listening intently from her command post, narrowed her eyes. Are you suggesting that Earth's technologies rely on such primitive solutions? Jack chuckled. Sometimes, yeah. You see, humans have a way of figuring things out that doesn't always involve top-of-the-line tech. We don't shy away from improvising, using what's available. Duct tape, salt, coffee, you name it. If it works, it works. Another alien officer, an engineer named Frillac with shimmering, almost translucent skin, couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. He leaned in closer, his wide eyes fixed on the human's hands. This rock salt, is it true it also repels certain supernatural entities, as you claimed? Jack flashed a grin, clearly enjoying the alien's reactions. Depends on who you ask, but it doesn't hurt to have a little extra protection, does it? Frillac leaned back, visibly fascinated, while Quar shook his head, muttering under his breath. The aliens, accustomed to strict adherence to protocol and years of scientific rigor, found Jack's nonchalance both baffling and oddly compelling. Cree finally spoke up, her voice calm but with a hint of urgency. Very well, human. You seem confident in your method. Proceed, but I want regular status updates on any changes to the energy fluctuations. Jack gave her a relaxed salute. Yes, ma'am. Though fair warning, things might get a little bumpy before they get better. The aliens exchanged worried glances. Bumpy? What exactly did that mean? On the Radiant Star, bumpy wasn't a term that inspired confidence. Jack placed the last mound of rock salt, standing back to survey his work with a satisfied nod. Then he pulled out a small, seemingly ancient Earth-made device from his pocket, a compass. As the metal needle twitched erratically, he gave it a few seconds to settle before looking up at Cree and the crew. All right, here's the deal, he said, holding up the compass for everyone to see. If the needle stops freaking out, we're on the right track. If it keeps spinning like a top, well, then we might have to get creative. Creative? Cree asked, her voice layered with skepticism and worry. You're using a magnetic needle to measure our survival? Jack smirked. Hey, it's worked for sailors and scouts for centuries. Why not now? The alien crew stood in tense silence, watching the needle dance back and forth. It jerked, hesitated, and then slowly began to stabilize, pointing in a single direction. The alien stared, slack-jawed. It's working? Quar whispered, hardly able to believe his eyes. Looks that way, Jack replied nonchalantly, pocketing the compass with a grin. Told you, sometimes it's the simple things. As the needle steadied, the Radiant Star's systems emitted a faint hum, signaling a decrease in the turbulence of the shielding. The lights across the bridge flickered briefly and then steadied, indicating a stabilization in power flow. The alien crew stared at the human, as if he'd just performed a miracle. Commander Cree's eyes were fixed on Jack, a mixture of disbelief and intrigue in her gaze. Human, I am compelled to admit, I did not expect this result. Jack shrugged, unfazed. Yeah, humans have a knack for the unexpected. Part of our charm, I guess. Just as relief began to settle across the command center, an alert blared across the console, signaling a new surge of activity from the anomaly. The readings on the screens fluctuated wildly as a new wave of energy battered the shields. The bridge plunged into chaos once more. Cree barked orders, her voice rising above the din. Prepare all secondary containment measures. Shields are at their limit. Jack, though visibly surprised, didn't lose his calm demeanor. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Well, that's interesting. Might need to try a different approach. Different approach? Quar asked, exasperated. We're about to be swallowed by a cosmic storm, and you think this is the time for experimentation? Jack raised his hands in a calming gesture. Relax, we still have options. Maybe if we double down on the rock salt around the power conduits, spread it out a bit to cover the whole circumference. Kind of like insulating a wire, but with, salt. Frillac's eyes widened, looking from Jack to Cree, clearly unsure if they should even entertain the idea. Is there any scientific basis for this, human? Sometimes you've just got to trust your instincts, Jack replied, a glint of humor in his eye. Besides, worst-case scenario, we've got one heck of a story to tell. With little else to go on, Cree nodded reluctantly. Very well, human. Proceed with your insulation technique. Jack quickly gathered more rock salt, spreading it carefully along the conduits and creating a thicker layer around the energy ports. The alien crew watched with a mixture of horror and fascination, some frantically taking notes, while others simply stared, mouths agape. As Jack finished his work, the entire bridge fell into a tense silence. The shield indicators showed a slight dip, then a rise, and then stability. The energy readings smoothed out, and the chaotic fluctuations gradually subsided. Cree let out a slow breath, visibly relieved. Remarkable, this primitive technique actually worked. Hey, Jack said with a grin, sometimes primitive is just another word for tried and true. One of the younger aliens, who had been watching quietly, suddenly piped up. Human, is this why you carry so many strange items? Salt, duct tape, coffee? Jack chuckled, nodding. Yep, humans have a saying. Better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. We like being prepared for anything. Frillac, still staring at the shield readings, muttered under his breath, This changes everything. If a simple earth mineral can stabilize a cosmic anomaly. Quar, unable to contain his irritation, folded his arms. This is utterly irrational. It goes against every scientific principle we know. Jack patted Quar's shoulder. Sometimes science doesn't have all the answers, my friend. It's all about getting your hands dirty and seeing what works. As the shields held steady, the alien crew's initial skepticism gave way to a begrudging respect. They continued to watch Jack with a mixture of awe and bemusement, struggling to comprehend how this laid-back, coffee-loving human had managed to save them with nothing but rock salt and a calm smile. The bridge was quiet once more, but it was a different silence. A silence filled with respect, admiration, and perhaps a touch of envy. Commander Cree allowed herself a rare smile. Human, you have given us much to consider. Perhaps we have underestimated your kind. Jack winked. Yeah, we humans have a way of surprising people. Just part of the job. With the shields temporarily stabilized, the bridge of the Radiant Star buzzed with cautious relief. Alien officers recalculated trajectories, ran diagnostics, and cautiously monitored the anomaly's behavior, ensuring that Jack's makeshift rock salt insulation held its own. Commander Cree allowed herself a moment of reprieve, though her posture remained rigid, her eyes fixated on the fluctuating readings. Jack, meanwhile, leaned against a console, watching the alien crew with a faint, amused smile. He took a long sip from his coffee mug, which only seemed to mystify the aliens further. Human, Commander Cree finally addressed him, breaking the silence. Your unconventional solution appears to have bought us some time. However, we are still within range of the anomaly's gravitational pull, and any further instability could compromise the entire mission. Jack shrugged, unbothered. Fair point, fair. But if we play this right, I think we can ride this out and maybe even learn something from this big cosmic headache. At that moment, an alert sounded across the bridge. Quar, the skeptical scientist, leaned over his console, his skin turning a deeper shade as he examined the readings. His expression, usually stoic, transformed into one of alarm. Commander, Quar stammered, we have another problem. The anomaly is emitting a new type of energy wave, something we haven't seen before. It's amplifying and targeting our magnetic fields. A hush fell over the bridge as the aliens processed this information. They had faced many threats before, but this was something new and unpredictable. Cree straightened, her face betraying a flicker of concern. Amplifying and targeting. Could it destabilize our systems? Quar nodded gravely. If the anomaly synchronizes with our magnetic fields, it could disrupt our core functions entirely. Our power sources might even implode. Implode? Jack raised an eyebrow, setting his coffee mug down. Well, that's inconvenient. Cree's glare could have cut through steel. Human, this is not the time for levity. If you have any further insight, now would be the moment to share it. Jack scratched his head, looking down thoughtfully. Well, the problem seems to be that the anomaly is amplifying your magnetic fields, right? Maybe we could find a way to counteract that, cancel out the amplification somehow. Quar scoffed. And how do you propose we accomplish that? We have already exhausted all known measures. Jack tapped his coffee mug thoughtfully, a sly grin forming on his face. You know, back on Earth, there's this thing called a Faraday cage. It's a simple enclosure that blocks electromagnetic fields. Maybe we could improvise something similar around the critical components. The alien crew exchanged glances. The concept of a Faraday cage was, in their minds, primitive, an antiquated tool from centuries past. But as the shields continued to flicker and the readings grew more chaotic, they realized that no option was too outlandish to consider. Sikri turned to Quar, her voice steely. Constructing a Faraday enclosure, is that feasible? Quar, still looking doubtful, sighed. In theory, yes. But to effectively shield the entirety of our core systems, we would need materials we don't have, or at least materials that could withstand the energy intensity of the anomaly. Jack grinned. That's the beauty of it. We don't need anything fancy. Just get me some conductive wiring, maybe a few sheets of metal if you have them lying around. Quar opened his mouth to argue, but Sikri raised a hand. Enough. Human, you have my permission. Gather what you need. But be aware, failure is not an option. Jack gave a quick, confident nod, moving swiftly toward the storage area, with a couple of alien engineers trailing behind him. He directed them to gather bundles of wiring, metal sheeting, and anything else conductive they could find. The alien engineers, unused to such improvised methods, fumbled as they hurried to follow his instructions. Back on the bridge, the tension mounted as the anomaly's magnetic interference intensified. Sikri clenched her hands, her voice calm but sharp. We have no time to waste. Status updates now. One of the officers spoke up, his voice tense. Commander, the anomaly's energy levels are rising. We're detecting additional gravitational distortions. It's pulling us in. Quar checked his readings, his usual stoicism faltering. At this rate, we'll be pulled into the anomaly's core within minutes. A voice crackled over the comms. Hey, Commander, I'm going to need just a little more time here, Jack called, the sound of clanging metal and hurried movement in the background. Time is precisely what we do not have, human, Sikri snapped. But she held her ground, watching as the shield levels dipped dangerously close to zero. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness. The bridge was a symphony of alarms, red lights flashing as the radiant star drifted closer to the heart of the anomaly. Just when it seemed they had no options left, Jack's voice broke through the noise once more. All right, I think we're good to go on the cage. Powering it up now. As Jack activated his makeshift Faraday cage around the shielding core, the effects were immediate. The ship's lights flickered, steadied, and then the shields showed a temporary surge in stability, holding against the anomaly's pull. The alien crew let out a collective sigh of relief, but the respite was short-lived. Another alarm blared, and this time it was Frillac who voiced their growing dread. Commander, there's a new surge in the anomaly. It's releasing unpredictable plasma bursts. Jack's voice came over the comms, calm as ever. Plasma bursts, huh? All right, we'll need something that can absorb that heat. Any of you got a large metal container, maybe some water? Frillac turned to Sikri, uncertain. Commander, what he's suggesting could create a vapor cloud that might— Silence, Sikri cut him off, her gaze resolute. Human, explain this plan of yours. Jack's voice remained steady. It's simple. If we create enough steam, we might be able to shield the ship from some of the plasma's heat. A makeshift buffer. Water heats up, turns into steam, and absorbs some of that energy. Trust me, sometimes the basics work wonders. The alien officers, still processing the audacity of such a suggestion, began rushing to follow Jack's instructions. They gathered large metal containers, filled them with water, and positioned them around vulnerable parts of the shield's containment unit, as Jack had advised. The bridge grew quiet once more as everyone held their breath. A plasma burst hit the ship, and a visible cloud of steam formed around the shielded area. The energy readings fluctuated, but the shields held. Barely, but they held. Quar looked on, his disbelief giving way to reluctant admiration. It's working. Against all odds, this madness is working. Jack returned to the bridge, wiping his hands on his shirt as he grinned at the stunned alien crew. "Told you. Sometimes it's not about fancy tech, it's about using what you've got." Commander C. Cree studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Human, your methods defy every principle of logic and order we have trained ourselves to follow." Jack shrugged. "Hey, when you're hanging by a thread, sometimes you just have to make do with what you've got." Before C. Cree could respond, yet another alert pierced the air. The anomaly's energy levels were spiking once more, higher than anything the ship had encountered so far. The plasma bursts intensified, each one sending tremors through the ship. The aliens looked to Jack, their eyes wide with a mixture of dread and trust. For the first time, their survival rested not in the hands of the Galactic Council's finest protocols, but in the instincts of one strange, calm human. C. Cree's voice, though resolute, held a note of urgency. "Human, do you have any other ideas?" Jack rubbed his chin thoughtfully, his mind racing. "All right, last-ditch effort, but it's a bit risky." "Proceed," C. Cree commanded. Jack glanced around, then locked eyes with C. Cree. "We need to use the ship's core as a countermagnetic force. If we can reverse the polarity and push against the anomaly's field, we might be able to escape its pull entirely." The alien crew stared at him horrified. "Reverse the polarity of the entire core?" Quar's voice trembled. "That would risk total system failure. If the core becomes unstable—" Jack raised his hands to calm him. I know, it's risky. But if we don't act, we're getting pulled into that anomaly either way. Sometimes you have to gamble." C. Cree nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Human, execute your plan." Jack moved quickly, guiding the alien engineers as they adjusted the core's systems to create a counterforce. The ship groaned under the strain, the lights dimming and surging as power redirected. The shields flared, then stabilized, and finally the ship began to push against the anomaly's gravitational field. "Hold steady!" C. Cree shouted, gripping the edge of her console as the ship shuddered violently. Jack adjusted the settings one final time, and with a low metallic groan, the radiant star broke free of the anomaly's pull. The ship rocketed out of its grasp, the stars beyond finally coming into focus as they left the anomaly behind. The bridge fell into stunned silence. Jack leaned back, hands on his hips, breathing heavily but grinning as the ship stabilized. "See, no biggie," he said, dusting his hands off with a chuckle. The aliens stared, too stunned to respond. C. Cree regarded him, her face a mask of respect, gratitude, and a hint of disbelief. "Human, against all odds, you saved us." Jack gave a casual salute. "All in a day's work, Commander. Now who's up for a coffee break?" As the radiant star stabilized in the quiet void of space, the alien crew stood in a mix of shock, awe, and deep contemplation. They had faced the unimaginable, survived it, and now, safe on the other side of the anomaly, they were left to process not only their survival, but the peculiar methods that had led to it. Commander C. Cree's gaze lingered on Jack, who now leaned comfortably against a railing, taking a long sip from his coffee mug as if he had merely completed a routine task. Her thoughts raced, grappling with the bizarre series of events that had saved their lives. There was no logical precedent, no mathematical model, no equation that could account for this. She had devoted her life to understanding and mastering galactic protocol, to aligning every aspect of her work to precise scientific principles. But here was a human, a creature so unconcerned with protocol, with no formal training in their advanced technology, who had saved them with little more than a mineral, basic metal sheets, and apparently something called a Faraday cage. Finally, breaking the silence, C. Cree spoke, her voice carrying a note of wonder she rarely allowed herself. "Human? Jack, what drives you to take such risks, to trust in primitive methods with so little certainty of success?" Jack looked up, his expression thoughtful. "You know, that's the thing about humans. We don't always have the luxury of certainty, but when things get dicey, we've learned to adapt, to make do with whatever's on hand. We just figure things out as we go." Quar, who had been notably quiet after the ordeal, took a step forward, his face reflecting a blend of admiration and frustration. "This adaptation, this reckless instinct, it defies everything we know about logic and order. We have trained for years, studied every aspect of cosmic phenomena, and yet none of it prepared us for a human's improvisational problem-solving. Jack shrugged, looking between Quar and Sikri. Maybe that's the difference between us. You guys prepare for every possibility, every outcome. We just go with the flow. The alien officers exchanged glances, their expressions revealing the depth of their inner turmoil. Frillac, the engineer who had assisted Jack with the makeshift Faraday cage, shook his head slowly, as if struggling to reconcile the day's events. "It's unsettling," he muttered, "that something as simple as rock salt and basic metal sheets could achieve what our advanced technology could not. We have trained ourselves to rely on precision, to value sophisticated solutions, and yet—" He trailed off, unable to find the words to express his thoughts. Sikri looked at Jack, her voice laced with curiosity. "Is this why humans carry so many strange items like duct tape and coffee?" Jack chuckled. "Pretty much. We've learned that the simplest tools are sometimes the most versatile. When in doubt, we reach for what we know works, even if it seems odd. I mean, sure, I could explain the science behind a Faraday cage, or why salt disrupts electromagnetic fields. But at the end of the day, it's about survival. If it works, it works." Quar frowned, clearly still grappling with the concept. "And what about the risks? How can you be so unbothered by the possibility of failure?" Jack took a deep breath, looking out at the vastness of space through the bridge's viewports. "Maybe it's because we humans have learned to live with risk. Life back on Earth, it's chaotic, unpredictable. Our history is full of disasters, wars, natural events that don't care about our plans or protocols, so we've learned to roll with it. We don't try to control everything because we know we can't." Sikri studied him, her mind racing with questions she could hardly articulate. Humans seemed by nature adaptable to chaos. It wasn't just about technology or protocol for them. It was a mindset, a willingness to embrace the unknown with resilience and humor. "But surely," she insisted, "there must be a point where you accept defeat, where you abandon hope of success?" Jack shook his head, a smile playing on his lips. "Maybe, but not until we've tried everything. And I mean everything. When things get tough, humans push harder. We look for answers in places no one else would think to look, and sometimes that's what gets us through." Frillac's voice was soft, contemplative. "So, you don't fear failure?" "Of course we do," Jack replied, laughing. "But we also know that failure isn't the end. It's just another step. Every failure teaches us something, makes us better. If rock salt hadn't worked, I'd have tried something else. Maybe it's stubbornness, or maybe it's that deep down, we believe there's always another way." The alien officers exchanged looks of profound realization. They had spent their lives avoiding failure, planning to perfection, ensuring that every variable was accounted for. The idea of failing repeatedly, of learning through trial and error, was deeply unsettling to them. Commander Sikri finally sighed, folding her arms thoughtfully. "Your species' resilience is remarkable, if unconventional. Perhaps we have underestimated the value of such adaptability." Jack gave her a nod, his expression genuine. "We all have our strengths, Commander. You guys have technology that we could only dream of. But sometimes, it's the willingness to get a little messy that makes the difference." Frillac turned to Sikri, his voice filled with newfound respect. "Commander, I believe there is much we could learn from humanity's approach. Their resilience, their adaptability. Perhaps these traits are as valuable as our technology." Kuwar shook his head slowly, still trying to wrap his mind around the day's events. "But it contradicts everything we know about efficiency, about precision. Are we to abandon our own methods in favor of improvisation?" Jack smiled, holding up a hand. "Whoa there, nobody's saying you should ditch everything you know. Just maybe don't be afraid to get creative now and then." Sikri looked back at her crew, sensing their mixed emotions, some filled with admiration, others with lingering skepticism. For herself, she felt both awe and discomfort, an odd mixture of respect and confusion. She had devoted her career to upholding the standards of galactic protocol, to perfecting a system that left no room for uncertainty. And yet, here stood a human who had shown her and her crew a different way, a way that, despite its lack of precision, had saved their lives. Turning back to Jack, she nodded. Your methods are difficult for us to accept, human. But today you have shown us that there are strengths we have yet to understand. We may not embrace them fully, but we will remember them. Jack grinned, raising his coffee mug in a small, friendly salute. Glad I could help. Just remember, sometimes all it takes is a little rock salt and a bit of nerve. Freelick, still gazing thoughtfully at the ship's stabilized energy readings, turned to his fellow engineers. Perhaps in future missions, we might consider supplementing our protocols with some creative alternatives. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crew. The thought of integrating human methods, however unorthodox, was both daunting and exhilarating. It was as if a door had been opened, a new frontier of understanding that went beyond their rigid protocols and systems. Sikri took a deep breath, her expression softening slightly. Very well. As of today, I shall make a formal note in our mission logs. In circumstances of extreme instability, consult human improvisational methods as a last resort. Jack let out a hearty laugh. Hey, I'll take that as a compliment. There was a flicker of amusement on Sikri's face as she looked at him. Take it as you will, human, but know that you have given us much to consider. You have changed our perspective. Kawar crossed his arms, though his expression had softened somewhat. Perhaps our council will find value in these alternative methods, but I doubt they will adopt them lightly. Jack shrugged. That's all right. Change takes time. Just don't be afraid to try something different when you need to. As the bridge settled into a quiet, contemplative state, Sikri found herself looking out at the stars, her mind racing with new possibilities. Today, they had encountered a human who defied every standard, every rule, and yet emerged victorious. It was a humbling experience, one that left her both challenged and inspired. Turning back to Jack, she inclined her head respectfully. Thank you, human. You have given us more than just a solution. You have given us a new way to see our world. Jack lifted his coffee mug, a warm smile on his face. Anytime, Commander. Anytime. With the radiant star stable but still within the anomaly's perimeter, the crew's relief was short-lived. The anomaly continued to pulse, sending new waves of energy into the ship's shielding system. Jack's quick fixes had granted them a reprieve, but the crew knew they couldn't remain there indefinitely. Every surge from the anomaly seemed more aggressive, as if the phenomenon itself sensed their presence. Sikri steadied herself, the gravity of their situation dawning on her once more. Human, while your improvisation has saved us, we cannot linger in this sector. The anomaly's intensity is rising. We must escape its pull entirely. Jack nodded, looking down at his now empty coffee mug with a sigh. All right, Commander, I'm with you. We're going to need every trick in the book to get out of here, though. As if on cue, an urgent alert blared across the bridge, and the lights dimmed, signaling a serious drop in power. One of the alien engineers, Freelick, scanned the console with mounting concern. Commander, the anomaly is now emitting gravitational waves, destabilizing our core systems, Freelick reported, his voice tense. We won't be able to maintain the shields for much longer. Sikri looked to Jack, her tone sharp. Human, you have demonstrated remarkable adaptability thus far. Do you have any further, unconventional solutions? Jack rubbed his hands together, thinking hard. We might have one last shot, but it's a bit of a long one. He glanced around at the alien officers, all waiting on his every word, their expressions a mix of trust and apprehension. What if we create a controlled overload? If we release a concentrated burst of energy, it could push against the anomaly's pull, just enough to jolt us out of its range. Quar, the ever-skeptical scientist, shook his head in disbelief. A controlled overload? You mean to deliberately destabilize our systems to achieve an energy thrust? That would put the entire ship at risk of implosion. Exactly, Jack said, grinning, but we'd only need to maintain it for a few seconds. Enough to break free from the anomaly's gravitational influence and get us moving in the opposite direction. Think of it like lighting a firecracker under us for a quick boost. The alien crew exchanged uneasy glances, murmuring among themselves. The thought of an intentionally induced overload went against every safety protocol they had. Sikri, however, was silent, her gaze locked on Jack as she considered the implications. Though risky, his plan might be their only hope. She took a deep breath, her tone decisive. Very well, human. If this controlled overload is the only way, then we shall proceed. Jack nodded, quickly issuing instructions to Frillac and the other engineers. All right, here's what we need to do. We'll reroute non-essential power sources to build up a charge in the main reactor. We'll need to stabilize the core manually, so get ready to move fast. The crew sprang into action, following Jack's guidance despite their apprehension. As Frillac and Quar adjusted the ship's energy grid, Jack himself took position at the central reactor controls, directing the power buildup. The ship groaned under the strain, lights flickering as the energy levels climbed. After a few minutes, Quar checked the readings, his voice trembling. Commander, we're approaching the energy threshold. Any further, and we risk a critical failure. Jack tightened his grip on the controls, his eyes focused. Steady. Just a little more. We need enough force to make this push count. Seacree's voice cut through the tension. Brace yourselves, everyone. We are initiating the overload. The reactor emitted a deep, ominous hum as energy surged through the ship's systems. Just as the ship reached its critical limit, Jack activated the thrust sequence, directing the energy burst against the anomaly's gravitational pull. The force jolted everyone on board, pushing the radiant star backward, away from the anomaly's core. The alien crew held their breath, gripping onto their consoles as the ship shuddered violently. The lights dimmed completely, plunging them into darkness before flickering back on as the ship stabilized outside the anomaly's gravitational field. But just as relief started to settle, a new alert blared, this one louder and more urgent than before. Frillac's console emitted a series of frantic beeps, his eyes widening as he processed the data. Commander, the reactor's containment field is destabilizing. The overload has caused severe structural stress on the core. Seacree's face paled. We cannot risk a reactor breach. If it fails now... Hold on, we've got one more option, Jack interrupted, voice calm despite the chaos. We need to cool the reactor fast. If we can drop the temperature, we might be able to stabilize it before it blows. Frillac looked at Jack, incredulous. Cool the reactor? The emergency systems are already maxed out. Jack's eyes scanned the bridge, his mind racing. What about that water we used earlier? If we channel it directly into the reactor's containment unit, it might absorb the excess heat just long enough to let us secure the containment field. The alien officers stared at him as though he'd lost his mind. Direct water flow into the reactor? That would cause a massive steam explosion, Quar protested. Only if we don't do it right, Jack replied, his voice steady. Trust me, this isn't the first time I've had to cool down an overheating system in a pinch. With no time to lose, Seacree nodded firmly. Proceed, human. We have no other choice. Jack sprang into action, instructing Frillac and the engineers to divert the remaining water supply toward the reactor's containment field. Working together, they positioned the emergency valves, adjusting pressure levels to ensure a steady, controlled flow. As the water made contact with the reactor's outer core, steam hissed and billowed, filling the containment chamber. The bridge grew tense, every officer watching the reactor's temperature readings with bated breath. Slowly, the temperature began to drop, each degree feeling like a small victory. The ship's lights flickered back to life, signaling a stabilization in the core's systems. Jack leaned back, wiping sweat from his forehead with a grin. There you have it, crisis averted, again. Seacree's shoulders finally relaxed, though her expression remained one of cautious respect. Human, you have led us through two impossible situations today. I am forced to acknowledge your unconventional methods, Jack shrugged. It's all in a day's work. Sometimes you just have to think on your feet. Just as the crew began to feel a sense of calm, the anomaly emitted one final pulse, a colossal energy wave that radiated outward, shaking the entire sector. Warning lights flared, and the ship rocked violently, throwing officers against their consoles. QR, regaining his footing, shouted, Commander, the anomaly's last wave has destabilized our navigation system. We're adrift. Seacree's eyes widened. Without navigation, they'd have no control over their trajectory, leaving them vulnerable to drifting toward any nearby celestial bodies. Jack? Seacree asked, a mix of hope and desperation in her voice. Jack squinted at the screens, considering their options. All right, There's one last thing we can try, but it's not exactly orthodox. Seacree sighed, almost amused. Human at this point, I'm prepared to accept any solution, orthodox or not. Jack grinned, glad to hear it. We're going to use the ship's gravitational field stabilizers to create a controlled magnetic thrust. It's not built for this, but if we reverse the output, it could act as a temporary propulsion system. Quar's eyes widened. That's madness. The stabilizers are calibrated to counter external gravity forces, not generate propulsion. The system could collapse. Jack shrugged. Maybe, but if we're careful, it'll get us moving. We'll just need to keep the output low to avoid burnout. With no other options, the crew set to work. Jack, directing the engineers, instructed them to reverse the stabilizer output and slowly ramp up the power. The ship trembled as the makeshift propulsion took effect, the stabilizers humming louder as they pushed the radiant star forward. The bridge was silent, each officer's eyes locked on their screens as the ship slowly gained momentum. Jack watched with satisfaction as the anomaly grew smaller on the view screen, a safe distance now between them and the volatile phenomenon. Finally, as the ship settled into a stable trajectory, Jack released the controls, a relieved grin spreading across his face. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we're in the clear. The alien crew erupted in quiet murmurs of relief, some exchanging glances of disbelief, others shaking their heads in admiration. They had survived the impossible, and it was due in no small part to the unorthodox strategies of the lone human among them. Seacree approached Jack, her expression one of both respect and humility. Human, your actions today have saved this crew. You have defied our protocols, challenged our principles, and yet you have proven that there is value in your resilience and adaptability. Jack chuckled, crossing his arms. Thanks, Commander. And hey, if you ever need a little more chaos in your life, you know where to find me. Seacree gave a rare smile. I shall remember that, though I hope it will not be necessary. As the bridge crew settled back into their stations, Frillac approached Jack, his expression thoughtful. Human, your methods are strange to us, yet today they have taught us much. Perhaps our reliance on protocol has blinded us to the possibilities beyond it. Jack gave him a friendly clap on the back. There's nothing wrong with protocol, Frillac, just don't be afraid to think outside the box when it counts. The crew exchanged quiet laughs and relieved smiles, the tension of the day melting into camaraderie and respect. The radiant star was safe, the anomaly behind them, and each alien on board had learned that there was far more to human ingenuity than they had ever imagined. Seacree glanced at the anomaly, now just a distant swirl of light on the view screen. Let it be noted in our records, when facing the unknown, consult a human, and ensure they have coffee and rock salt on hand. Jack laughed, holding up his empty coffee mug and a mock toast. Here's to problem-solving human style. The bridge filled with quiet laughter, the crew sharing in a moment of levity that felt well-earned. In that moment, they were no longer just officers of the Radiant Star. They were a team, unified by the improbable, unpredictable ingenuity of one human and the challenges they had faced together. The Radiant Star floated safely outside the influence of the anomaly, the ship's systems finally quiet, and the alien crew settling back into their stations, with a shared sense of relief. The intensity of their recent ordeal still lingered, but a new atmosphere had emerged on the bridge, one marked by respect, camaraderie, and perhaps a hint of awe for the human who had defied their expectations. Commander Seacree took a moment to survey her crew, noting the subtle but undeniable change in their expressions. Officers who had previously regarded the human with skepticism now looked upon him with something approaching admiration. For herself, Seacree felt a deep contemplative respect, both for Jack's quick thinking and for the broader lesson he had taught them all. She turned to face Jack, who was casually sipping from his empty coffee mug as if nothing unusual had happened. With a slight nod, she approached him, her voice softer than usual. Human, your actions today have not only saved our lives, but have forced us to reconsider much of what we believed to be unshakable. I underestimated your species' resilience and creativity. Jack raised his mug in acknowledgement, a warm smile on his face. No hard feelings, Commander. Honestly, I didn't expect to be here today doing any of this. Just figured I'd show up and do what I could. Frillac, the engineer who had assisted Jack throughout their ordeal, stepped forward, his usually reserved face alight with newfound respect. Human, I must admit, I doubted you at every turn. But you've shown us that there is strength in simplicity. Your methods, they challenge everything I thought I knew about problem solving. Jack laughed, scratching the back of his neck. Hey, sometimes all it takes is a bit of rock salt and a few crazy ideas. Not everything has to make sense as long as it works. Quar, the scientist who had been the most vocal skeptic of Jack's methods, approached as well, his expression unreadable. Human, I struggle to accept what I have seen today. Your methods were reckless, irrational, and yet— He paused, visibly grappling with his words. And yet they were effective. You have shown me that perhaps there are forms of logic beyond what we understand. Jack met Quar's gaze, giving him a respectful nod. Science and logic are great, don't get me wrong. But sometimes you just have to trust your instincts and take a chance. Quar considered this, his skepticism tempered by a grudging acceptance. Perhaps there is wisdom in embracing the unknown, even if it defies our understanding. The bridge fell into a comfortable silence, the crew quietly reflecting on the day's events. Sikri finally broke the silence, her voice carrying a thoughtful tone. Human, you have demonstrated a resilience that is rare, even among our most seasoned officers. Your willingness to improvise, to embrace risk, it has taught us all a valuable lesson. Jack chuckled, leaning back against a console. Well, if there's one thing humans are good at, it's making do with what we've got. Sometimes it's messy, and sometimes it doesn't make a lick of sense, but we figure it out. And I guess that's what matters. Frillac nodded, a faint smile on his usually serious face. Today, you have given us a new perspective. Perhaps it is time we reevaluate our reliance on protocol and precision. Sikri took a deep breath, nodding in agreement. Indeed. From this day forward, I shall make it known in our records that human improvisational methods are to be consulted as a last resort, she added with a wry smile. The crew chuckled softly, the tension melting into light-heartedness as they shared a rare moment of levity. Jack lifted his empty coffee mug in a mock toast. Well, here's to new friendships, and to always having a bit of rock salt handy. Sikri extended her hand to Jack, a gesture of respect and gratitude. You have our thanks, human, and though I doubt I shall ever understand your methods, I am grateful to have witnessed them firsthand. Jack took her hand with a firm shake, grinning. Any time, Commander, and if you ever find yourself in another pinch, just remember, sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. As the crew resumed their duties, a few aliens quietly exchanged their own reflections on the experience, sharing stories of how Jack's methods had upended their perceptions of human resilience. Officers who had once dismissed human ingenuity as primitive now saw it as a source of unexpected strength. Frillac approached Jack, his tone curious. Human, may I ask, what is it that drives your kind to take such risks, to embrace such chaos? Jack thought for a moment, choosing his words carefully. I think it's because life's unpredictable. Back on Earth, things don't always go as planned. Storms, accidents, all kinds of unexpected stuff. We just learn to roll with it. To us, a setback isn't the end of the road. It's just a new direction. Frillac nodded, considering this. Perhaps there is something to be said for adapting to uncertainty. It is a quality we have not valued until now. Sikri observed the exchange, a thoughtful expression on her face. Human, you may have changed the way we approach future missions. This day will be remembered as a turning point. Jack grinned. Glad I could help. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I've earned a refill. He gave his coffee mug a little shake, the emptiness all too apparent. Sikri chuckled softly, a rare and surprising sound from her. Very well, human. I shall see to it that a supply of coffee is kept on board for future emergencies. I suspect it may prove to be as vital as rock salt. The crew shared a laugh, the tension and exhaustion of the day giving way to a sense of unity. They had faced a near impossible threat, and through Jack's unorthodox methods, they had triumphed. The alien officers exchanged nods, quietly acknowledging the profound impact this human had made on their lives and perspectives. As Jack headed for the crew's galley to refill his mug, Frillac called after him. "Human, will you share with us more of these Earth solutions? Your duct tape and other items of improvisational value?" Jack turned, grinning from ear to ear. "Absolutely. I'll give you the full rundown. Duct tape, chewing gum, maybe even a little WD-40. Consider it a masterclass in human ingenuity." With a wave, he left the bridge, leaving behind a crew forever changed by his presence. The alien officers, each reflecting on what they had learned, quietly discussed the possibility of incorporating human-inspired emergency kits into future missions. As Sikri watched Jack disappear down the corridor, she allowed herself a quiet moment of introspection. Today had challenged everything she had believed about order, protocol, and the value of precision. It had shown her that sometimes survival required more than technology and logic. It required adaptability, resilience, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. Turning to her crew, she gave a solemn nod. "As we document this mission, let it be known. In moments of extreme crisis, human creativity and resilience have proven invaluable. And in the future, we shall be open to methods beyond our own, however unconventional they may be." The bridge was silent as her words sank in, the officers nodding in agreement. They had not only survived the anomaly, but had gained a newfound respect for the resourcefulness that Jack represented. Today they had glimpsed a side of humanity they had not understood, a strength that lay not in technology or precision, but in the sheer, unyielding spirit that had carried them through the impossible. As they continued their journey, the crew knew that they were no longer the same. They had faced the unknown and emerged with a respect for the unpredictable, chaotic, yet undeniably effective nature of human ingenuity. And as for Sikri, she made a mental note to keep a supply of rock salt and coffee close at hand, should they ever find themselves in need of another human-style solution. Weeks later, the Galactic Council convened to hear the report from Commander Sikri and the crew of the Radiant Star. Representatives from dozens of species gathered, their gazes intent as Sikri took her place at the central podium, flanked by her officers. The council chamber was filled with a sense of formality and order, a stark contrast to the chaos they had faced within the Selox anomaly. Sikri cleared her throat, the weight of the mission heavy on her shoulders. "Honored members of the council, we present our findings from the Selox anomaly mission. I can confirm that we successfully navigated and survived the encounter, though not without unexpected challenges." A murmur rippled through the chamber, and one of the senior counselors, an imposing figure with iridescent scales, leaned forward. "Commander, we have read reports that credit a human crew member's involvement. Is it true that this human's methods deviated from galactic protocols?" Sikri nodded, her face reflecting both respect and humility. "It is true, Counselor. Human specialist Jack played an instrumental role. His methods were unconventional and at times defied our understanding of standard procedures. Yet it was precisely this unorthodox approach that enabled our survival." The counselors exchanged skeptical glances, their eyes narrowing as they struggled to reconcile this new information. The senior counselor spoke again, his tone sharp. "And what exactly did this human employ to save you, Commander?" Sikri took a steadying breath, knowing her answer would be received with mixed emotions. He used simple tools, rock salt, basic wiring, and a method he referred to as a Faraday cage. He also proposed an energy overload to propel the ship from the anomaly's gravitational field. Without these methods, our survival would have been unlikely. Another counselor, a thin, silver-skinned scientist, scoffed softly. "Rock salt and basic wiring? Commander, surely there were more sophisticated options." Sikri's gaze didn't waver. "Counselor, we had exhausted all available options within our protocol. It was human improvisation that saw us through. While it may appear primitive, the human's approach allowed us to adapt to challenges we had not anticipated. I believe it would be unwise to dismiss such adaptability, as it has broadened our understanding." The council fell silent, processing her words. It was no small feat to admit that the human's methods, however simple, had triumphed where advanced technology had failed. Finally, the senior counselor nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. So, Commander, you are suggesting that we reconsider our stance on human participation in missions of this nature? Cree nodded. Yes, Counselor. Humanity's strength lies not in technology, but in their resilience and adaptability. These qualities allowed us to navigate a situation we had thought insurmountable. I propose that future protocols incorporate a degree of flexibility, and that human improvisational skills be taken into consideration. After a long pause, the senior counselor addressed the chamber. Let it be noted that the Radiant Star's mission has brought to light the value of alternative methods. The Council shall review current protocols to determine how we might better integrate this human ingenuity. As the counselors deliberated, Cree's crew exchanged subtle smiles, each of them carrying a sense of pride for what they had accomplished. Their mission had not only been a success, but a turning point in how the galaxy viewed humanity. Once the Council had concluded their session, Cree joined her officers in the antechamber. Frilak, Quar, and the other crew members seemed lighter, relieved. Frilak turned to Cree, his eyes glinting with humor. Commander, I never thought I'd see the day when rock salt became a galactic protocol. Cree allowed herself a rare smile. Nor did I, Frilak, but it seems we have all learned something from this experience. Quar nodded, a quiet respect in his gaze. Perhaps we were too quick to dismiss human ingenuity. Today we have witnessed a different kind of strength. At that moment the doors opened, and Jack strolled in, holding his ever-present coffee mug. He raised it in a playful salute, grinning as he took in the scene. So how'd it go? Are we officially friends with the Council now? Cree chuckled, giving him a nod. Thanks to you, human, they are reconsidering our protocols. You have made an impression. Jack laughed, looking genuinely pleased. Well, I'm glad I could help. Who knows, maybe next time they'll keep a stash of rock salt and duct tape on hand, just in case. Frilak tilted his head, amused. And coffee? Jack grinned, lifting his mug in another toast. Absolutely, coffee, rock salt, and duct tape, the holy trinity of human problem-solving. As laughter filled the room, Cree felt a sense of camaraderie unlike any she had experienced before. In one mission, they had faced the unknown, defied protocol, and against all odds, emerged as a team bonded by respect and resilience. With the mission behind them, the Radiant Star's crew looked forward to future journeys, knowing they would carry with them the lessons of that day, a testament to humanity's unique and surprising strengths. And from that day on, whenever the Galactic Council faced the unknown, they would remember the human who had shown them that sometimes the simplest solutions, grounded in courage and creativity, could be the most powerful of all.